Don't you guys find it funny that Dragon Ball Magic is going to be a show where Goku turns into a kid again, and Toriyama this time around is actually going to have a lot more involvement than he had in Dragon Ball GT? Well, if you're wondering what's funny about this, it's the mere fact that Toriyama himself has a history of openly speaking about aging Goku. Toriyama directly stated, as translated by Herms98 in an interview, that he actually threatened to end the Dragon Ball series if they didn't allow Goku to actually grow up. And as you can see in this other interview here where Toriyama was discussing this more in fact, it made it pretty clear that aging Goku was not necessarily a popular idea at the time. And to be specific about this, for those who don't know, it's mainly because of the fact that Dragon Ball is a shonen series, and because shonen series tend to aim towards younger audiences, the general point is that you want to have a younger protagonist, so by aging Goku, you're kind of defying the laws of what the shonen genre was essentially supposed to be, and Toriyama took a risk. He wanted Goku to grow, and because of that, we had a chance to have an adult Goku. But what exactly is the problem? When Goku becomes a kid, this feels like you're watching Tiny Toons, and for anybody who doesn't know, it's basically when you're just watching the younger versions of the characters, and it's fun to have, your laughs and stuff, but we as Dragon Ball fans already went through Goku becoming a kid, and we went through the best points of Goku becoming a kid. We saw the processes of Goku growing and fighting stronger villains and having the pain of loss and losing his friends and having to fight to bring them back. We saw the entire saga, and all of this came to an ultimate conclusion near the end of Dragon Ball, and well, at least you could say the Dragon Ball portion of the Dragon Ball manga, even though it's all the Dragon Ball manga, but you get where we're coming from. The portion of Dragon Ball that we call Dragon Ball. We get to a very important episode where Goku essentially becomes an adult. And when we actually think about this moment, this was monumental for Dragon Ball because as an audience, we'd never seen Goku as an adult at this point, and neither had Goku's friends ever had a chance to see Goku as an adult. It was a beautiful moment because Goku had spent years training with Kami and Mr. Popo on the lookout, and he came back as a grown man. And this was a very, very important moment for how it completely shows the shift of all of what we saw building up in Dragon Ball to get to this one moment where we finally got a chance to see an adult Goku. And it was very fitting seeing an adult Goku having to fight against Piccolo Jr. when the previous Goku that fought against King Piccolo was a child. It was a beautiful dynamic seeing the two grown-up versions having this innate beef that takes back from years before. And when you decide to reverse Goku, as we saw in Dragon Ball GT and what we're anticipating we're going to see in Dragon Ball Magic, it just completely eliminates all of the moments that we went through as fans getting up to this point. Now, you could say on the side that maybe Dragon Ball Magic is aiming for a newer audience to appreciate Dragon Ball in its own way, and you can make an argument for that, but it always is interesting when people say that, because you could say we're not the target audience anymore, but when you really think about who really consumes Dragon Ball, we still have a huge impact on the overall Dragon Ball economy, because, for the most part, a lot of people simply just can't get their minds off of this anime and manga series, and it persists even into our adulthoods. But apart from this, when we think about it, Dragon Ball GT already tried this concept of Goku becoming a kid again, and it just didn't work. There were some interesting moments where you could say that maybe the Outer Space Black Star Dragon Ball Hunt had some funny moments between Goku, Pan, and Trunks, but there was always this weird dynamic of Goku being an adult in a child's body, and that he's younger than his own granddaughter. But the whole dynamic that we've seen of Goku throughout Dragon Ball history that was completely nullified in Dragon Ball GT is that Goku is supposed to be a man-child. When Goku acts extremely immature as a child, it's too fitting for what it's supposed to be. When Goku's an adult but acts like a child, it creates the effect that was intended from Goku growing into an adult the whole time. Goku was a person that grew up literally in the middle of nowhere, so he never had the proper social etiquette to really fit into a normal society, And Bulma obviously noted this, and Goku was a kid, so it was a little bit more acceptable. But because Goku kept a lot of these childlike behaviors as an adult, it created this extra level of humor towards his character where he maintained that man-childness and he was always still the same Goku after all of those years. And a good moment that really illustrates this is when we go back to the Changes episode and we see that Goku was talking about Bulma's lipstick being blood to truly show you that he really still is the same Goku despite all of the years that has grown. And when you make Goku a kid, you eliminate that awkward feeling that we're supposed to feel that makes Dragon Ball feel so genuine in that man-childness of Goku himself. And to show you how much of a problem Goku becoming a kid is in Dragon Ball, we can just look at GT to prove that the show writers were clearly aware that turning Goku into a kid had its faults at certain points, and they found a very, very unique way to nullify this. And this was making Goku a Super Saiyan 4, because as long as you make him a Super Saiyan 4 for a good amount of screen time, it kind of helps us forget the fact that Goku was a kid. Now, it still kind of felt weird seeing Goku become an adult as a Super Saiyan 4, because it's like, well, that's cool and dandy, but why don't you just age Goku up into being an adult again? Why do you have to maintain the kid becoming an adult but then going back into a kid thing? That whole gimmick really ran dry throughout Dragon Ball, and seeing a chibi Goku always fighting and losing the parts of his abilities just feels like a slap in the face to fans, because we saw Goku go through all of this progression to get all of these extra powers and to get to the certain point of Dragon Ball. But it's kind of like, alright, well, things are getting a little too complicated now, so let's just completely nerf Goku back. And it's just a certain thing whenever you're playing a video game or watching a movie or reading or seeing anything. Wherever you see a character just lose their powers, it takes a lot away from the fun of it, because you want to see that your character is capable of doing all of what they can, and it still may not be enough against a particular enemy, which really adds tension to the series. But when you handicap your main character, it just makes it less fun to watch, and that is something that Dragon Ball GT had a problem with. And this directly ties back into Dragon Ball GT, because we would see Kid Goku fighting somebody, and we would always know that he's really not at his full power because A, he doesn't have his adult body, and he's not a Super Saiyan 4. So a lot of the times where you see Kid Goku fighting, it just feels like a waste of screen time, because it's like, alright, let's just wait for him to power up. And even then, when we saw moments of him barely able to control his Super Saiyan 3, it just felt like, okay, the show completely just nerfed Goku, and that takes away from what Goku's supposed to be. Goku's supposed to be the master that has full control over everything, especially near the end of Dragon Ball Z and beyond, where he became the master teaching Oob, and it was like a passing of the torch. Now, another thing we have to point out too is that as a whole, the whole idea of Dragon Ball Magic just really feels like filler, and going back to what a lot of you guys have been saying about this over the last few days, in a lot of ways, because so many people have been anticipating Black Frieza, getting to see Moro in the Granola arcs animated and all of this stuff, it's kind of like, alright, let's make this filler anime about Goku becoming a kid again. And the key reason why fans feel this way is very simple. Whether you like Dragon Ball Super or not, you have to admit that objectively the best arcs that Dragon Ball Super has ever had has been in the Moro arc, and even to some degree the Granola arc, because relative to the other arcs that we've seen in Dragon Ball Super, even though the Granola arc and the Moro arc have their issues, those two arcs definitely stomp on most. So the fact that we finally got to the better parts of Dragon Ball Super and we won't expect to see these parts be animated for such a while really is a bummer to Dragon Ball fans. Now let's not forget marketing here, because even though you can market this as being aimed for younger audiences, when you create a more general type of Dragon Ball, it just attracts a much larger audience. And then when that audience finds interest, it just continues to grow exponentially. And when you specifically aim it for a younger audience, it's just gonna be a complete turn-off for the older fans. And to be specific, guys, marketing has been one of the things that Dragon Ball Super has done successfully. It found ways to force fans to care, even if they forced fans to care through extremely artificial means, which will be in its own separate video for another day. But the point that we're trying to get at here, guys, is that Dragon Ball fans have been starved. And this is very similar to what the fan base was like when I started making Dragon Ball videos years ago, where people had such an interest in Dragon Ball, but they weren't feeling satisfied because there wasn't really anything new coming out, that they consumed anything Dragon Ball. And this is the total opposite of what happened with Dragon Ball GT, where we had Dragon Ball burnout, where we had too much Dragon Ball for so many years, and GT came right after the end of Dragon Ball Z. So as a result of it, we also went through that with Dragon Ball Super 2, where we were overly consumed by having so much Super stuff that there's been a good hiatus for fans to kind of have that absence makes the heart grow fonder feel. And it's taken so long, and now we're doing a completely new thing. And as a result of all of this, it just seems like Dragon Ball fans aren't getting the proper food that they need to satisfy themselves with Dragon Ball.